Welcome back, everybody. In today's video, I want to answer a question I get asked all the time. A lot of you guys know, if you've been watching the channel for a while, I own a lot of Monteros. I think right now I actually have like 7 of them in my possession. And so I own a lot of Monteros. I buy a lot of them that are broken and fix them up. And so I need a lot of Montero parts. And one of the #1 questions I get asked all the time is, where are you finding parts for these things? So today I'm going to show you an interview I did about 6 months ago with the guy who started Lusooverland. This is Marco. He runs Lusooverland, and he is my #1 resource for finding Montero parts. And it's worth mentioning, he's not paying me to say any of this. This isn't a sponsored video. Marco's just a good guy who sells awesome Montero parts. He started this business right about the same time I was getting into Monteros, and he started it out of necessity of saying, I have a Montero, I want parts, let's figure out how to bring them in. So I hope you guys enjoy this interview. If you've never heard of Lusooverland, I encourage you, check it out. I almost guarantee he's got what you need. But with that, I hope you guys enjoy this video. All right, welcome back, everybody. I'm here with Marco, who is the owner of Lusooverland. We're here in the warehouse today, and I just want to sit down with him and interview him, see why he started Lusooverland. If you guys don't know about Lusooverland yet, you should absolutely check it out. It's the best place to get Montero parts. But yeah, Marco, tell us a little bit about yourself. Who are you, and how'd you get into Monteros?
Okay, cool. Well, I got into Monteros many moons ago. I wanted to get into the hobby of 4-wheel driving. And I'd never owned a 4x4, but some buddies had them, and it was just, you know, I was always into like camping and outdoors and recreation, and so I wanted a 4-wheel drive. So I started looking at Land Cruisers. Classic way to get into a Montero,
Yeah,
right?
yeah, it is.
I was looking at Land Cruisers, but the price tag was just obviously astronomical. And then so I was looking at Jeeps, and I was pretty certain that I was going to get a Grand Cherokee, like a WJ.
Okay, yeah.
And then I was just researching that because I'm a very analytical person. So I never really just dive into things. I usually like do a ton of research and then make a decision. And so I was going to get a WJ. And then I was like, okay, well, you got to get bigger tires. But the problem with the WJ is, where's it going to go? Because it goes inside the vehicle. So once you get bigger than like stock, you got to put it on the roof or get a spare tire carrier. The spare tire, yeah, sorry. And then I was like, I need a locker. If I can get a lift with 33s and a locker, I could go almost anywhere. But all those other things were going to add up to more or as much as I was going to spend on the vehicle. So I literally typed into Google vehicles that came with a locker from the factory.
Nice.
And I'm looking through and I see Montero, and I was like, what's that? And I kind of rang a bell because in college, one of my roommates had a Montero Sport for a small period of time. And then I went and saw the Expedition Portal forum, and I read Eurosonic's build post on his Gen 2.5 from start to finish. I was up literally the entire night. It's like 30-something pages long. And by 7 a.m. the next morning, I was like, I'm getting a Montero.
Wow. Okay.
And then I started the hunt. Ended up taking me months to find a 97 that was in San Diego. And so my very first Montero, I had to travel out of state and drive it back.
So you bought it relatively sight unseen.
Yeah.
And just road tripped it back.
Yeah.
That's awesome. I love that. I've done that twice now. That's rad. Okay, how many years ago was that?
I think that was about 9.
Okay.
Around there, maybe 8.
Yeah, so like 2014, 2015, 2016.
Yeah.
Okay, gotcha. Yeah. So you own that one. What made you want to start Lusooverland?
It was just completely out of need, just organically. Several years in Monteros later, I had gotten into the Gen 3 world. I transitioned from the Gen 2, then a 2.5, and then eventually a 3. And I think it was exhaust manifolds.
Okay.
I think I had cracked exhaust manifolds and I had to find replacements. It was either that or coil springs, but either way, I found replacements overseas. And I was like, well, if I'm going to get one for me, I might as well order a few.
Yeah.
And because I know other people that need them.
Totally.
And it just kind of snowballed from there. Started with, I think, exhaust manifolds and maybe coil springs and a few other things. And just kept adding to it.
Gotcha. You just kept going and going, and now, I mean, you've got shelves and shelves and shelves of stuff. So one of the questions I have, yeah, the Montero world, overseas they're really popular. In different places you can get parts pretty regularly. The United States is kind of a mixed bag, especially as you get into the Gen 2 and lower. like the Gen 1, finding parts at a parts store, it's not really a thing. There's some of them, even stuff like online, you can sometimes source it. Gen 3 is on its way out, probably. They're 20-year-old vehicles. So how do you end up sourcing these parts? I mean, every part's going to be different, but you seem to find things that I didn't know were findable.
Right. Yeah, I mean, it's different every time. Obviously, the other thing is since it's my full-time job, I have obviously more time and resources to put towards it. But every situation is different. A lot of times we're reaching out to factories that make the part. Like say they make whatever calipers, and they may not make Montero calipers, but if we can get them like the specs or a unit to work off of, then they can kind of engineer it backwards from there. And so like with, for example, one of the newest products we came out with that didn't exist was this Gen 1 exterior window moldings. And that's basically what it was, is taking the original Mitsubishi moldings, the Hyundai Galloper moldings, deciding what features we liked of which, getting in touch with a factory that makes nothing but window moldings, and then just going back and forth with like design changes and prototypes and things like that until we're happy.
Gotcha.
And then the other way that's really common is now that we're actually been doing this a while, it's coming up on 5 years since Lusooverland started, and we're kind of become the go-to place for Montero stuff. We're able to now reach out to these big manufacturers like Eisen or whatever, NTN, and work with them just directly to order parts. So we don't, for some things, we don't even need to go through like a distributor. We can just order direct from Eisen North America.
Yeah. That's super convenient. I mean, yeah, the fact that you go all the way to the top, one, that cuts down costs, but two, those are the people who have the keys to make the things. So that makes a ton of sense.
Yeah, and especially now because a growing need that is just, we're getting more and more calls of guys who are importing Pajeros. And so that's kind of something that I'm spending more time focusing on now, is how can we maybe start supporting some differences. So now companies like Eisen, they're maybe a little bit more willing to spend some time answering some questions for me on like, hey, what water pump would Page Evo need? And can we get that here, even though normally wouldn't sell it here? Things like that. So that's kind of one of the things that we're working on now.
Yeah, it's great to have those relationships with the manufacturers, because they're the people that would be able to help you out with that. So you've obviously got some stock of aftermarket parts that you trust. You've got some Mitsu parts, but then you've also got some parts that you guys are kind of creating on your own, or you've played a hand in development. So like, what does that look like? Is that something where you're reaching out to people for that, or are they finding you and saying, help me make this a reality? Is it a little bit of both?
It's a little bit of both, but it's more us reaching out to places that specialize in making one thing, and then us asking them to make it a certain way for Monteros, like the skid plate. The skid plates that we're coming out with, that's reaching out to companies that make skid plates already for other vehicles, and then it's just a question of working out the dimensions and where the holes need to go and all that stuff to fit. So some of my time, I wish it was more, is spent like wrenching on vehicles, testing out the parts. It becomes less and less, I feel like, every year with having to do more like office work and stuff. I wish I was out here more, and I get jealous of the guys when they're out here all day long and I'm like stuck staring at a computer, because I would want to be doing that. It's way funner.
Well, you got to have one to make the other work. That's just how it goes. Gotcha. Well, what is next for Lusooverland?
I mean, there's always a million things in the works. Some concrete, specific examples. We've already touched on getting some skid plates back in here.
And are those going to be your design?
Yeah.
Like the Lusooverland skid plates?
Yeah, they will be.
That's pretty sweet.
It'll just be, I know this is going to disappoint some people, but we have to start somewhere. It's just going to be the front three for the Gen 3. So front, oil pan, transmission.
Those are the ones that you need to like get off the ground, though. So I think that's great.
And then the rear HVAC. So it'll be those 4 models that we start with, and then whether we add, Gen 2, Gen 1, Sport, other things like the fuel tank, it'll have to come later. And then a lot of this, unfortunately, like as much as I love Gen 1s, there's not very many of them out there. And so we sometimes have to make business decisions. And it's like, if we're going to sell 5 of these a year versus 50 of these a year, like, unfortunately we have to make decisions like that too.
Oh, no, makes total sense to me.
Because I'm like, well, I want this for my Gen 1. So, but But it's different when it's, you know, your job and everything. So that's going on. Fuel filler hoses are something that I've been working on.
Yeah. I know some guys who need one for a Gen 1.
Yeah. So, well, Gen 1, I think we have pretty well covered right now.
Do you?
Because there's an aftermarket one. You can get any, it's for like certain years of F-150s, F-250s.
They'll
where the
fit?
bend is almost the same. Like
Okay.
I'm running one on my Gen 1. It was no problem at all.
Okay.
So we sell a lot of those already. But for the Gen 2s and the Gen 3s, you can't get fuel filler hoses easily. So we're working on that. Higher level things is going to be focusing more on like products, that just don't exist. We'll still continue to bring in like genuine Mitsubishi parts. Every week we typically release something new, like add it to our stock.
Yeah, the amount of new product releases you guys do blows my mind.
Yeah.
It seems like you're constantly bringing in new things.
Well, it's tough because it's like there's a million parts on a car.
Yeah.
And so we have to kind of prioritize what's the thing that breaks the most that everybody needs and work our way down the list of common issues, right? And then the other thing is we get asked a lot for kits. And like timing belt kits are very popular, but what about other kits? And so I think that's this is all still kind of up in the air, but what I'm leaning towards for 2025 is adding a lot more kits. So let's say like a transmission service kit where it comes with all the fluid, the filter, the crush washer, the cross member, bushings, like everything you need in one box.
Wow.
So that you're not having to like go to the website and add each thing individually to your cart.
Yeah.
Maybe a tune-up kit with your plugs and your wires and your gaskets. Maybe maybe a driveline kit, like whatever things we see that people are typically ordering in groups, maybe we can put those into something that makes it easier.
Yeah, and I love that too, because what you guys have is like, you know which bushings and which things you're going to need to replace versus, you know, when these companies are doing it on a really high level and they're not actually with the car, or maybe they don't really care, then you get through it. And like, I've had timing belt kits where I take something all the way apart and I'm missing a crucial gasket. And then I got to go wait a couple days for that to get shipped in or whatever. Versus you guys, I mean, we've even had conversations back and forth about like, hey, when you do that job, let me know, do you need this? Do you not need this? And I'll tell you, you don't need it, but it'd be nice. And you say, I'm chucking it in. So to have something like that where, you can buy one thing and service your transmission the right way, that's pretty key. So
and I mean, we get a lot of good feedback too from other Montero users and customers. To speak to your point, like the dual overhead cam Ison water pump doesn't have the small O-ring in it from Ison. But it's the same O-ring that the single overhead cam water pump uses. They just didn't know to put it in that kit. So like we go and now we put that in the kit for people, stuff like that. That just happens randomly.
Yeah, and it's that kind of detail that makes what you guys do in an enthusiast market so important, because the enthusiast, the end receiver of this product, like they know it's going to work. They know that someone who actually cared put it together, because if you're in there, you care. And so it's nice to know that it's something that you're getting from you guys for selling it. So made a huge difference for me, and it's easy to order parts. Every time I get a Montero, I go through and I find my model and I order up all the parts I want, and there's a Luso overland shipment coming right after it. So, and I buy a lot of Monteros. So
yes, as we all do once we get the bug. I tell you what, man, it's a weird way to make a living. Like people come in here, delivery people or whatever, and they're like, "What do you guys do here?" You know, they see all like the Monteros out back and everything, and it's like, we sell parts for cars that were never popular in this country and they haven't made since 2006.
That's so true. But there's an enthusiast group that really cares about them, wants to stay on the road, and you've got a lot of the goods that make that happen. So
I mean, I do tell people, like, and I genuinely mean it, like, what's the best part of having a Montero versus a Land Cruiser or any other vehicle? It's like the community.
I 100% agree.
Everyone is cool. There is so little drama in the Montero like groups and everything.
No one's got a chip on their shoulder. No one's got something to prove. We're all just here to have a good time.
Like, you're not the first Montero guy that I've met. Like, people that we meet in our lives strictly because they've had Monteros. You know, it happens all the time. People come through town. They say hi. We got a couple of people working on their Montero in the back right now. They were passing through town. So it's the coolest part. Everybody helps each other out. There's no drama.
The community is so rad. It's unlike anything else I've found in the enthusiast space. So, and it's been super fun to visit the other guys down in Phoenix about it. So. Sweet. Let's take a tour of the warehouse.
Let's do it. Yeah, I mean, things are always changing. We're always adding new products. So yeah, we got the Super Pro shelf right here. This is a pretty new addition. We've only had them for about 4 or 5 months. So Australian polyurethane bushings. There's a lot of different bushings that Monteros use, so that's why there's so many different part numbers and everything. And then we just started doing spark plugs and wires, like ignition stuff.
Saw this.
So we just added some Denso and NGK products to our lineup. And then if we come on this way, we start getting into the genuine Mitsubishi products in this area. So, you know, whether it's a thermostat or a valve cover gasket, there's certain parts that
intake gaskets, which you really really need. I'm seeing cam seals. I don't know what those bolts are for, but I'm sure I've replaced them. I probably bought some of those.
That is the front mount of the rear diff on a Gen 3.
That's right.
You cut it.
Because you have to cut it, to get it out sometimes. Yep, 100%. Okay. Yeah, and then this is cool, like the limited badge, if you're missing one of those, or even these, like, these raised ones. That's pretty slick.
So there's certain things that I'm pretty passionate about using OEM for, some critical things, like the thermostat is a good example, crank bolt.
Totally.
Any kind of timing products, so like the genuine crank bolts, things like that. So
here's all your belts.
Yeah, any kind of drive belt that you would need for a Montero Sport we have. And those are made by Bando.
Yep, and then let's see. These are all tie rods, battery hold downs. Dude, this is so fun. I've ordered almost everything on this shelf, I think.
All your alignment bolts.
All the alignment bolts for sure. Yep, I've got those. I throw a crank bolt in every single thing I order. But is this timing belt kits?
Yeah, so this is the timing belt kit section. So we get all the different components from all the different manufacturers, you know, whether it's like Ison for the water pumps, or like NTN for the auto tensioner. And so we just get all that stuff and then we assemble the kits in-house. And so like these are the finished kits ready to go out. So like these are Gen 3 kits ready to go. So when you get that, it has everything in it.
And you've got them, everything. So yeah, Gen 3 with the 3.5 and the 3.8 and then 24 valve, 3 liter, double overhead cam. You've got all of it right here. That's pretty sweet. So you're not ordering the kit, then repackaging. You're actually assembling a whole kit yourself with all OEM stuff.
Yeah, that's the way that we're able to keep the cost down, because if we were to order just like the water pump from Mitsubishi, it would cost more than the entire kit. Yeah. So by ordering the water pumps direct from the same place as Mitsubishi, from Ison,
same thing.
So the only difference is it's going to come in an Ison box instead of having been private labeled into a Mitsubishi box.
Which doesn't make a single difference for the part, but makes a difference for the cost on the consumer end. So.
Right. And then there's some components where, for whatever reason, we can't get them direct from the manufacturer. So like, for example, they might still come in with the Mitsubishi packaging.
Totally.
But for the most part, it's going to come in the manufacturer packaging.
Sweet. And then you got springs for days over here. Yeah, lots of
springs. Springs, and we're actually low right now.
Okay.
We're actually out of a few models, but we have a level shipment coming in next week.
Okay.
So every single gap everywhere will get filled in with springs next week. But yeah, I mean, we have a lot of different models for every Montero, different heights and things like that.
What's in here?
These are all of those third row storage Molly panels.
Oh, sweet.
For a Gen 3.
Okay.
As well as the horizontal shelves that go in between them.
Yeah, you can flat pack them. That's nice. That makes sense.
So that's where those are. And then we've got our genuine SP3 fluid hanging out down there for your transmission services.
Yeah, I'm really glad you guys stock that.
And then our skid plate shelf is really low right now because our skid plate supplier went out of business in Australia. So we're having to have skid plates sourced elsewhere. And so we've got a few Gen 2 skid plates over here, but we've got prototypes in. So like this is what the new Gen 3 skids are going to look like. This one's 3mm steel that's been powder coated.
That looks sweet.
Yeah, I like this one a lot too.
So same thing as on Yoshi, but that one's half the thickness because it's steel.
Exactly.
Gotcha.
Exactly. And then like here's the oil pan one.
Yep.
And then this is the rear HVAC skid.
Yeah.
So
awesome.
So yeah.
What's this one for? Is this the Molly panel?
Yeah.
On the side.
For a Gen 2.
For a Gen 2. Yeah, that makes sense.
Side Molly panels.
Sweet. Do you think you'll ever carry a gas tank skid for a Gen 2?
Never say never.
Okay.
Don't have anything in the works for it right
Sure,
now or anything
yeah.
like that, but yeah, never say never.
That's what I'm trying to figure out next.
Just 'cause-
I've got my own, but I'd like a... Yeah,
Right.
I'll figure it out.
Well, because we're always adding stuff. Like at any given time, there's 12 irons in the fire, like projects all at various stages of completion, you know? And then here are those floor mats we were talking about today
yeah.
for the Gen 3. This is the first row, the second row is hanging out there right now. And then we coming down this row, we get way more of levels, and this is where we have our shocks.
Yeah, we've got the Conies and the Bilsteins.
Yeah, those are the only two brands that we carry at the moment for shocks.
Yeah. Backside of all the springs.
Right, and then we start getting a lot of random stuff. So we've got all our Wix filters, our MPCV boots, the engine guards, wiper blades.
Yeah, and then wiper motors down here too. Ice and hubs. Sweet. Yeah, and then this is all ball joints.
Yeah, this is a Sankei 555 shelf where we have ball joints, tie rods, pitman arms, idler arms. Stock's pretty low right now. We've got some gaps here because they don't make it until we order it in Japan. I think just because of how rare Montero parts sales are to the US. So we can have periods where we've got a ton, and then we can have these gaps, and we're still kind of, they're kind of still figuring out our sales history and our order history, and so that's one of the challenges with some of this stuff.
All right, what's happening here?
Well, this is probably the most exhaust manifolds in the Western Hemisphere.
Oh my gosh.
for Monteros. We got hundreds of them.
Yeah.
But it's a common failure part, and so we sell
And for a
lot
long time, they were really hard to find
Yes.
until you started bringing them in, basically. So that's huge to see this many in the same place.
Right. There was a period where you could get OEM ones, and then they kind of dried up and everything, and so these aftermarket ones help fill that void. And I think you can still get the OEM ones. It's just that they're like 3 or 4 times the price.
Yeah, way expensive.
Yeah. And they're, I mean, in all fairness, the OEM ones are better. Like you should definitely get 15 years out of the OEM ones.
Sure, but
So, whereas our oldest ones, these are like 6 years old at this point. So,
Okay.
but they've been doing good.
yeah, I mean, I'm just thrilled that they're available because mine almost every single time I've made a couple videos about it, they're cracked in half or more than half. So.
Right. Right. So, you know, a million different things in here, but one thing that I'm happy about, this was another thing. The thing that gives me the most satisfaction is when we find a part that is a real pain point for people because it doesn't exist. You know, because it's a pain point for me personally. Because
Totally.
you know, I have these vehicles and I drive them all the time and wheel them. And this was one of them, rear CV boots for a Gen 3 for the rear axles. Like that was something that was just not what you can get. The front axles you could get CV boots for from a different ones, but not rear.
Yeah.
And so that was one that I was real happy to get that solved.
Yeah, that's awesome.
So we got a lot of weather stripping in here.
Sun visors over here, weather stripping for all different models.
Yeah, coolant tanks. This is all those exterior window moldings that tend to get, you know,
Worked in the sun.
Yeah. Yeah, a lot more smaller parts in this area, but along the same lines. So, you know, these high pressure fuel pump hoses for a Gen 1 or Gen 2, that was something else that I was super happy to get this sorted out because you just couldn't get high pressure hoses for your fuel pump.
Yeah. Yeah, and you got all sorts of stuff like, a locking bolt for that rear tire carrier. Like that's very specific. So that's super cool. Yeah, you've got all sorts of just fun little quirky things in here.
Grab handles.
Grab handles. Yeah, like this right here. I have had these go bad on me.
Oh, the power mirror switch.
Yeah, and I think my one right now is bad actually. So. Sweet, so there you go, guys. This is Marco. He runs Lusooverland. Hopefully you guys have enjoyed this. It's been awesome to be here to see the facility where I've spent quite a bit of money, ordered quite a lot of parts.
We appreciate it.
And I'm just grateful for you doing this. I mean, this is a huge thing for everyone who's trying to keep these on the road, keep them modified. So thanks so much for your time, and thanks for running this business.
Oh, you're most welcome.
So there you guys go. That's where I get a lot of my Montero parts. Now, Marco doesn't have everything, but he is my #1 stop. Whenever I buy a new Montero, like this 2.5, which I'll be doing a video on shortly, one of the first things I do is I go to Lusooverland, I order up the essential maintenance stuff, and then he's got so many things to modify them like you saw in this video. So hopefully this is helpful. If you got any questions or you want to place an order, go to lusooverland.com, and I'll catch you guys on the next one.